Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of Tabletop. This is your host, Nick, and boy, howdy, do we got a great conversation coming your way today. You guys may not know this, but like 2 years ago, I got connected with the Dice Legends folks just because we were doing some ad shares. I really enjoyed their work, wanted to talk to them, and all these years later, I got an email from them talking about a new podcast that's coming out now. It's already started to be released. If you're interested in hopping on, I really suggest it. It's called Dungeon Mastering is Easy and is hosted by the amazing Vahid Qualls, who is here today in our virtual studio. So welcome, Vahid. It's so good to have you. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, about the podcast, everything like that?
Hey, thanks so much, Nick. Thank you so much for the very kind words entering. It's really cool to be reconnecting after a couple of years. It's awesome, isn't it?
Yeah, I know. I was like, this is a shot in the dark, but let's see what happens.
Yeah, super cool. And your podcast and our new podcast, Dungeon Mastering Easy, there's such a great overlap, and so I think it's a really beautiful connection.
Yeah. And you guys have started what sort of got you guys into this idea for a podcast? Because the sort of hobby is large. There's lots of stuff to talk about. What made you want to focus in on sort of the sort of onboarding, I guess, of new dungeon masters?
Yeah, we're really, really interested in a niche within a niche within a niche. Okay, right?
It's good
So,
business, right? To get as narrow as possible.
right. So Dungeons and Dragons, 50 million people worldwide play it, right?
Yeah.
Of those, one in, I don't know what percentage are dungeon masters, but okay,
Yeah.
so that's a narrower niche. And then what the world has been experiencing right from the beginning of Dungeons and Dragons really is a dungeon master shortage,
Yeah.
where more people want to be players than dungeon masters.
Hmm.
And so it's been, I think, quite accurately analyzed that the biggest limitation for the growth of the hobby
Hmm.
is bringing new dungeon masters in.
Yeah.
And so the kind of feeling of, either I don't feel like I'm up to it, it's too complicated, or it's too much time, or whatever is restricting people from taking the step of being a dungeon master is actually limits the growth of the hobby. And so
Yeah.
we really wanted to focus on a podcast that helps experienced dungeon masters, but is really focused on people that are new to it, that are gaining their first steps and want to have some practical, helpful, inspirational ideas to take these kind of really fun, exciting journey. Because I
Yeah.
think if players just stay as players, that's awesome.
Hmm.
But there's actually a lot more enjoyment in the hobby to be found when you're also doing dungeon mastering.
And let me kind of add on to this because I think that that's such a great thesis statement. And it's also such a kind of admirable thing because, like you said, people get really scared of it to have that sort of responsibility in some way. A lot of people kind of view it as sort of, like I'm holding up this campaign by myself, which I wouldn't actually say is 100% true, but it is the perception that a lot of people have going into their first time GMing. But also, I would say for people who are experienced players, have been playing for years, and you're at a table and you have a DM or GM, like that should not limit you for wanting to give it a roll. Because I have been at a table now for like 3 years, and we all just rotate GMs because we're all comfortable kind of doing both. And it adds so much life to the table as well, because you're like, ooh, I can't wait to see what like Danny has cooked up, or I can't wait to
Yeah.
to play in this campaign, or whatever it is for the amount of time that you're doing it. So even if you are an experienced player and you're like, I got my GM, I don't need to do this, it is so much fun, and I think
Yes.
really broadens your appreciation of the hobby to give it a try too. So great podcast. I know I've already subscribed. I'm very excited. But that's not exactly what we brought you on today to talk about. We wanted to talk about this kind of little idea that you brought to me, where both of our podcasts have sort of talked about or talked around this. The idea that, like, if you're starting out, are you jumping in right away to building your own adventure, building your own module, building your own world, and trying to adapt these mechanics that you are playing within, maybe for the first time? and you're trying to adapt them to whatever you are trying to do custom? Or is it better to just pick up a module or a dungeon specifically that somebody else has run or and created and tested, and then give that to you and say, this is actually where you should start? So why don't you talk about why you've been thinking about this,
Yeah.
what you think is sort of your thoughts on it, and we'll go from there.
Yeah. I've been reflecting a lot recently around the difference between event based Dungeons and Dragons adventures and location based. And I'll kind of
Mm,
dive into that a little bit more of what I mean. Like a lot of people that are new into Dungeons and Dragons within the last 10 years have very likely seen shows that are kind of created by people that are media professionals, they're storytelling professionals, and they're often event based stories, right?
mhm.
They follow kind of cinematic or kind of approaches. We even refer to scenes, stuff
Yeah.
like that. And I've been reflecting recently about how different that was from when I started and from when many people started, which was based around location
Yeah.
based things using published sources. And of course, I mean, both are beautiful. In my own Dungeons and Dragons gaming now, I almost exclusively do homebrew stuff. But
Yeah.
I think that there is huge value in using published settings and published modules.
Hmm.
Not only especially for beginners,
Yeah.
but not only for beginners.
Yeah.
And so like, when I first started being a dungeon master, we only did modules. And we only did dungeons because
Yeah.
that's all there was.
Right. And this is actually something I want to sort of clarify terms for folks too, because already I can hear people maybe who with a little
Yeah.
more experience with like the IP being like, well, is Strahd an event based? Because it's sort of, or would you say that like Ravenloft or like the Dread Plains or whatever, are those kind of like a dungeon because they kind of swallow you up and you're in there? And are you talking about these sort of adventures that last, maybe a 1 to 20? Or are you really specifically
Okay.
on like, this is a dungeon and you're going to be in here until you leave the dungeon?
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So when I'm talking about, so that's why I'd like to kind of use the word, dungeon is like, it's in the name of the game, right?
Yeah.
Dungeons is the first word of the entire game. Dungeons and Dragons, and just as, so what I mean by a dungeon in this context is a single location that has a contained single location that
Hmm.
has a variety of fights, puzzles, challenges.
Yeah.
Now it might be a crypt, it might be a mine, it might be a ruin, it might be a castle,
Hmm.
it could be a series of caverns, canyons. I mean.
Yeah.
Now, a large campaign such as Curse of Strahd
Hmm.
or Rime of the Frost Maiden or something like this, which is designed to take you from, like in the Rime of the Frost Maiden goes from 1 to 9, I think.
Mm. Yeah.
It's a combination of events like, when you do this, after you've done that, then there are these options and it leaves, but then it takes you to locations which then have dungeons within them, self-contained things that you enter, and they have a selection of monsters and challenges and puzzles and
Yeah.
things like that. That was
Yeah.
a very long
No, but I think it's so
description.
important because I think that a lot of people when they're like, okay, it's my first time, maybe I'm gonna just grab something and do it, and they grab Curse of Strahd or something,
That's a mistake.
which which is I think a mistake, yeah, because it is so expansive and it's designed for you to basically kind of homebrew around the thesis of the module or the adventure. And I think I agree that if you want to start GMing, you should look even more narrow, because a walled garden actually is going to help you learn, but also be super creative with the limited skills and tools you know how to use at the beginning. So yes, it was long-winded, but I think it was very, very important that we both kind of establish what we're talking about.
Yeah. Do you know, one of the things I was, when you said, I don't know why what you said triggered this in my brain, but it did. In the original Dungeons and Dragons, look, I've played every edition of D&D, right? So
Yeah.
in the very first edition of Dungeons and Dragons, there's a famous module for level 1 players called Keep on the Borderlands.
Yeah.
You spend hours and hours playing this. The entire module is 24 pages.
Yeah.
The entire thing.
Mm-hmm.
Curse of Strahd's what, like 250 pages?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And the thing that is so beautiful sort of about some of these older modules that were designed around a specific place and a dungeon that you were doing is that it allowed for people to jump in and to really kind of break everything.
Sure. Yeah.
And it wasn't like, even when they're kind of falling down over the mechanics, or if you're not able to adjudicate right away in a way that's like super improvisational, and maybe like you have to kind of have a sense of like the spirit of the rules sometimes, it in such a kind of a contained place, you're able to be like, I kind of know what I'm going to get into. The genre of things that can happen are contained in a little, in a way that is helpful rather than restrictive, I think. And it allows a new person to just sort of like bang up against all of the most asked questions, or the things that they just kind of need to have a general knowledge of, usually combat rules and maybe some exploration rules to start with. You know what I mean?
One of the advantages of those old school dungeons, and I think there's something that we could probably incorporate more in the modern aesthetic,
Yeah.
is that it simplifies the task of it for a dungeon master.
Yes.
You know, there are three main roles for a dungeon master. Like there's the rules adjudicator, there's the weaver of the storyline, and there's the voice of the NPC.
Yeah.
Now, as a new dungeon master, if you're struggling to do any of those things, it's actually can be, I don't know, lack of confidence can come in. The thing that's so great about a location-based thing like a dungeon, where they generally do focus on combat,
Yeah.
is it gives you, starting off with simple first-level characters, you get to learn how to do the rules in an easy way, and the players will almost certainly try to break the dungeon for you, and you learn that improvisation that you were just talking about.
Yeah.
And you don't have to have in your mind, okay, all the threads of all the non-playing characters, what's that baron over there doing, what's that lizard sorceress do? You know, you don't have to worry about all that stuff. You can focus on learning the ropes, and then that can lead on to other things. I think it's a kinder way to get into it.
Yeah, and something that that kind of reminded me of is that when you have a dungeon that you are running for the first time, and it is something that is 24 pages or less, maybe even like if you're doing something that's more like Morkborg style, that's like 3 or 4 pages or something. It teaches you also how to prep as a DM.
That's right, yeah.
So you're like looking and you're like, oh, what am I looking for? Oh, I'm looking for a table that does this. And then that means that like if you start kind of seeing what you need, most often you're going to go into games that you're running, even if it's not a pre-made dungeon, and you're going to have those tools because you're just like, I use them all the time. So I'm just going to make sure that I have something like it. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And thinking in terms of prep, I think that's another one of the pluses for these kind of bringing this old school approach into a new aesthetic. And that is the prep time for something like Curse of Strahd. I mean, you have to, I'm speaking ignorantly. I've never run Curse of Strahd, but from what people say, it sounds like it takes people quite a bit of time to prep, that you do need to read a lot and understand. And well, man, the Keep on the Borderlands, dude. There's so little to read. You know, it's so
Goblins
easy
are in
to
there.
Yeah. The stat blocks are there. There's a map. You say, oh, number 5. Okay, what's number 5? Oh, mine shaft. And you know, it's the prep time for a dungeon location-based adventure is so much easier than a plot point one, which might have, if this happens, then go there. If this
Yeah.
happens, try that. Yeah.
And just like think about if you're a new DM and you are doing somebody else's module, you're probably like, I think one of the hardest things when running a pre-written adventure like Strahd or something is that you have to remember somebody else's characters and how they all interact. One of the
Yeah.
easier parts about homebrewing is that you sort of have created these characters, and so you kind of know how things fit together loosely in your brain. But
True.
I think that the best thing that happens with these dungeon modules is that it's like, okay, you might find people in here, but it's sort of like that's the puzzle of the room. It's a social encounter, one of the tenets, and
Yeah.
so you're gonna have that sort of already prepped because you're not remembering. Okay, how does this one person know like 20 other people that I've had to create or read about in a module? So I think that also helps with new people because then they can just focus on the mechanics. Because if you're actively thinking about a lot of those things, it's just going to be slow. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
And I
that's
think,
exactly right.
yeah, and like new DMs that I find struggle the most with tempo. I don't know if that is something that you've sort of experienced, but just like how to keep a game moving in at a pace that feels good. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's right. There's I think the because a new dungeon master is often learning. Well, if they're brand new, if they not haven't been playing very long, they're
Yeah,
kind of learning the rules as well,
yeah,
and needing to look things up all the time,
hard.
which is understandable.
Yeah,
Um, like uh, you've been playing for a little while. I've been playing for a little while. I don't know about you, but I don't have all the spells and things memorized.
yeah.
Um,
No, 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 no.
you
Most of
know,
the slowest moments of my campaigns are like, yeah, so you say this. What does that mean? What does that do? Like just
exactly.
stopping down.
Yeah, like hang on, wait, what the heck?
Yeah.
So I think for a new dungeon master, doing pacing is really something to learn, and also like macro and micro, like within the combat, how to keep things moving ahead and
Hmm.
not feeling like combat is getting stale. Because you
Yeah.
want combat to be exciting, you don't want it to feel like it's a drudgery. So there's a whole
Hmm.
bunch of skills around that, but then also on the like in the session, like to be able to figure out how much is reasonable to prepare for um, in a session.
Yeah.
And again, dungeons make it a little bit easier for that because you
Yeah.
can assume a simple fight's going to be a half an hour, a medium fight's going to be 45 to an hour, a really hard epic fight's going to be an hour and a half. So you can think, okay, in this adventure, they're likely to do 4 fights in a
Yeah.
module. All right, that'll be a session.
Yeah. Yeah. And I also think that it so a question I have for you essentially is because I know a lot of people go from player to GM because of that more event based campaign that they want to run. They're like, I have a story in me or something that I want to express. Um, I want you because I have my own feelings on it, and we can talk about that too. But I want you to sort of talk to that person and be like, "Hey, man, maybe try this first, and like
Yeah.
why?" Because we've kind of gone through like this is kind of a teaching moment, but also like how can you kind of sell somebody on wanting to do this first, essentially?
Sure. So what I would suggest is, yeah, cool, awesome. Do an event-based story. All right. We've got like if it's a political thriller, or
Hmm.
if it's because like political thrillers are by their definition they're event-based. They're
Yeah,
not so much location-based, right? Or if it's a sprawling wandering across the lands, like a Lord of the Rings kind of thing.
yeah,
But you can still start your first sessions as a way of getting into it and really getting a sense of the mechanics. And for players to get a sense of what their characters can do, start in media res, which means in the action, in a location.
yeah,
So have your first session right into it, like the first scene in Star Wars, the very first movie of Star Wars. For anyone who hasn't seen Star Wars, that breaks my heart. But anyway,
Spoilers.
the very first scene starts with a big ship basically swallowing a smaller ship and a big fight.
Yeah,
You don't know what's going on. But you're right, that's in media res. And so I would say to those dungeon masters that want to do an event-based story, have your first session starting off with a conflict that's connected to that story in a location,
Hmm.
in a small dungeon, the cellars underneath the palace,
Yeah.
the crypt of the fallen queen,
Hmm.
something like that that connects to the story, but gives you a location base because it's much easier to run.
And let's like be honest, you might not even need the story tie-in quite yet. Because if you think about like a lot of the very famous sort of media that use TTRPGs to kind of build out and adjudicate their stories, most of them at some point or other had some association with a pre-written module that started them off. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like Taz,
yeah,
it
yeah,
was, Minds of Fendelver, and Penny Arcade way long ago did like a 4E module. Like there's a ton of these that have started that way. And I think that, like you said, do a couple of these, because it's actually good storytelling too, to be like, oh, this is the gang getting together, and then maybe after you do a couple of them, spit them out somewhere into another
yeah.
problem that is going to connect you into your bigger thing that you want to run. You know what I mean?
That's right. And what you said just sparked off a memory of the social group that I have, not
Yeah.
connected to Dice Legends. We're a group that's been playing together for a very long time. And one of the players had never dungeon mastered before
Yeah.
until earlier this year. And what he did was really clever. He did a dungeon-based thing, but and it was like a 4 to 5 session thing. It was in a
Yeah.
homebrew world, but it was still a dungeon
Yeah.
of, and that setting, that dungeon opened up so many more questions about a bigger world that it's like the springboard to go into something more sprawling, event based.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think I had something similar happen at my table where we had a player who is a great player, does such great characters, very fun to play with, but was always like, "I'm not gonna GM, guys. Like, don't look at me. Like, I'm not doing this." And we were basically like, "You have to. The next one, you have to. Sorry." And she did an amazing dungeon that was like at a magical cupcake factory, and it was a five
Wow.
room dungeon, and it was amazing. And it was like
Oh,
you can have your kind of weirdo stamp on a dungeon too. It doesn't have to feel like, oh, I'm just
yeah,
walking down into this mountain. You can set it in a weird place that you really feel passionate about.
that's right. Yeah, beautiful. That's amazing story. A cupcake factory dungeon.
Yeah, and
I
it was
don't think
basically like the CEO was like, it was an aggressive layoff sort of thing, and it was very much like all of the people of the factory coming together and being like, this is a bad situation, we got to get out of here. So
wow, that is amazing.
yeah.
Yeah. The thing about I find helpful about dungeons is actually you can throw them together yourself. If you want to homebrew them,
Yeah.
you can throw them together pretty quickly. Like what I used to do for years when someone said, "Oh, you do Dungeons and Dragons? I'd love to try that someday." And I'd say, "Yeah, come around," and we'd throw something together. There are heaps of maps online
Yeah.
of dungeons. I particularly loved. You might have heard of this fellow named Dyson Dodecahedron.
Yeah. Yeah.
Dyson's logos. He does he does the dungeons in the back of the new Dungeon Master's Guide.
Yes.
I just go onto his site. He's put them up for private use. You
Yeah.
go there, you find a cave system. You good at You decide, what do we want the monsters to be? I think we're going to go, let's say a hag, and the
Yeah.
hag's controlling a group of kobolds. Right.
Yeah. There you go. Easy. Done. Boom.
Done.
And the only thing that I would say there is like, I would challenge you to, if you want to build your own dungeon, really try to adhere to the 5 room dungeon just to start with. You know what I mean? If you're going to build from a base, use that template, because it's like it's going to be friendly for you, the dungeon master, and it's also going to be friendly for your table, because they're going to kind of know what to expect from a 5 room dungeon. It's like, maybe we're going to have one or a kind of like social interaction. We're going to have probably two skill based like
Yeah,
rooms, and
sure.
then we're going to have two like a mid boss and a big boss or whatever.
Yeah, yeah. Awesome.
And it's easy, and you just build it that way, and it's basically perfect for a one shot too, so you can test it out and be like, okay, I built this thing, does it play?
Yeah.
And kind of like it's like that good mid ground between a pre-written dungeon that has already been play tested and
Yeah.
doing your own full sort of adventure.
Yeah, that's super cool. Yeah. Such a great format.
Hmm.
Cut template,
Yeah.
So
Yeah, and
helpful.
it's great for encounter design too, because that's honestly I think the hardest part about that people don't really realize going into a DMC is that when you are designing an encounter, a good GM is going to be like, okay, so this is the fight, and it's balanced to basically be harder than it should a little bit because D&D characters are superheroes. So
That's
you're
right.
going to
Yeah.
want to always kind of go towards the deadly end of Kobold Fight Club's little meter. And then you also are like, okay, so now I have all the monsters, I've populated this room. Then like a good dungeon master is going to say, what are all my skill-based players going to be interested in doing in this fight? How can I accommodate that? Okay, I'm going to put two levels. I'm going to make it so there's some archers up there, and like there's like this big like magic pool down there that like an arcana-based character could maybe play with. And then you're like, okay, so now I have something for them to do. And then you're like, okay, how would these monsters act? Like you were talking about kobolds, they're probably pack animals. You know what I mean? And they're kind of ant-like in that they gather resources and then bring it back to their kind of leader. And so, like, how would that interact in how they're going to move throughout the encounter? So, these are the things you start having to think about when you're designing these rooms. And I
Yeah.
think that it's so helpful because you're going to feel it immediately if you start designing and you haven't thought about how to entertain a full table. And you're like, oh, everyone's just saying, I swing my sword, I swing my sword,
Totally.
or
Yeah. Yeah.
whatever. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And that is actually a very, very good point. And I think that like what I was mentioning before about taking these location-based concept into a new aesthetic, the modern
Yeah.
aesthetic.
Hmm.
What you're referring to is the modern approach. Like
Yeah.
in the old days, we just had the maps. If you look at those old school maps, it's
Hmm.
just like a rectangle with a door, right?
Yeah.
If
Very
you're
Zelda.
lucky, right? If you're lucky, there'll be a star which indicates there's a statue in there, right?
Yeah.
That's the level of detail that and then the room will have a bit of flavor text saying the smell of must and decay fills the room,
Yeah.
cobwebs cover the door. And then you guys go, all right, guys, I think there's a spider inside. You go in there and there's no other description. It's just there's a spider in a square or rectangular room, right?
Yeah.
So I think now what you're describing is so much more interesting for players, especially like, and so like one of the things that I've been putting some thought into this as well, and I think it's really interesting what you've just said. Every encounter, there should be a motivation.
Hmm.
Why are we doing this encounter? Like there's some thought from the dungeon master to think, okay, why are they what's the motivation of why is it just to get through it? Is it to
Hmm.
get out? Is it to collect something? Is it to stop something? Is it to grab someone? Is it to leave some, there needs to be a
Yeah.
reason for the encounter. And then the things that you were just talking about I really love, which is terrain and interactive objects. Like
Yeah.
a rectangle room with no change of elevation or holes or things like that is okay, but
Yeah.
it's not as okay. It's not as cool as something with a ledge.
Yeah.
Because if you get a ledge, fighters are going to love throwing people off it all day.
Yeah. They're gonna be like,
And
this is my favorite thing. Whoop.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
They just can't resist. You put
Yeah.
a ledge there and they're going to use push. They're going to be using their pushing all day long. They're going to love it.
Yeah.
And object interactions. A couple of flasks of burnable oil on the
Yes.
side wall, even though they've got oil in their backpack,
Yeah.
they're still going to go over, grab those oil flasks and throw them around.
Yeah. And that will also I think like if you have that homebrew need and you're like, listen, you guys are making good points, but I just want to make my whole thing from scratch anyway, because I really want, this is my plea to you. you can still do all of the fun creation stuff that makes you super interested in being a GM, which is great, and you should keep that fire lit for as long as possible, and just put it onto an older module that is more of the classic Dungeons and Dragons sort of like, AD&D sort of module, because the base foundation is there. And then if you still want to do some of the stuff we're talking about building on top of that, if that's really what makes you excited about being a dungeon master, that's a great way to kind of speed that process up.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And dungeons and location-based things are a great shorthand way for doing certain things. Like a a, a classic event-based story structure is you need to collect a certain number of items before you can do the next thing. Like it's the computer game equivalent of you need to get the pass key to enter the door.
Yeah.
There's, you need to collect a certain number of gems before you can do the ritual, right? Those kind of
Mhm.
things. Well, dungeons are the perfect place to have those things that need to be collected,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah, because it's a very classic, like da 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 da. The chest is in the last room. It's great. Throw a mimic in halfway through to give them false hope.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And one thing I wanted to kind of pick your brain on this subject too is you were talking about sort of like justification for why to use a dungeon, and like collecting items that might be important later, all that kind of stuff is amazing. One of the sort of conversations we've had on the podcast before, and Franco, one of my co-hosts, has a very firm view of like just start them outside the dungeon. You know what I mean?
Yeah, man.
Like, hey, yeah, the push the gates open, you're in the first room. So what would you say to DMs who are going to be like, okay, I'm going to take your advice, I'm going to just grab up one of these dungeons, but I'm new. I feel like the things that I feel super scared of usually are going to be at the very beginning and the very end. How do I start a session? How do I end a session?
Yeah,
And
yeah,
how do I make that feel good?
yeah.
So like, what would your advice be? And like, what are the benefits around trying to use a pre-existing dungeon for this kind of work?
Sure. So, as you were saying before, just start in front of the dungeon.
Yeah.
I think some of these, and one of the benefits of that is that one of the places that a story can be taken off the rails right at the beginning is right at the beginning.
Yeah.
Like when you're having an interaction, like you say, okay, guys, you're meeting in a tavern. A wizard who can no longer see and can't do adventuring anymore hires you to do a job. And then the players go, yeah, cool. I want to follow that cat.
Yeah.
And
Did that cat just serve someone a beer? Like, what is that cat's deal?
yeah. I'm going to find out how that cat got enchanted. And then
Yeah.
all of a sudden, you're off on something completely different. So
Yeah.
if sometimes it's actually better to just kick open the door
Mm-hmm.
and then to do that other stuff in flashbacks.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that's actually, if you're like, I don't even want to run 5 rooms, you could make, or the 5-room dungeon. If you want to make 2 of your rooms flashbacks to the taverns where they're meeting, and it's a social encounter, or maybe it's a weird brawl that they're all a part of, and how do they get out of it? Like, they're gonna love that too. Like,
Yeah.
you can start them. I really like what you said earlier about like in media res. Like, I always start my campaigns now the way that like Brendan Lee Mulligan did for one of the Critical Roles, where he's like, all right, what's your name? Alphonse. All right, Alphonse, tell us what it's like when you spit one of your teeth out after being punched in the face in this
Yeah.
brawl. And
Beautiful.
like that is great, because it doesn't give the characters or the players time to be like, what's that weird cat? They're like, oh, I have an immediate threat and purpose.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And one of the tricks that is to say you don't even spend time doing character descriptions at the beginning.
Yeah.
You say each round on your turn, say include one description of your character on your turn. Just one. thing.
Yeah.
So, okay, your turn. What do you do? Okay, I load my, there's a bunch of opponents, whatever they are. What are you doing? Okay, I pull back my bow and shoot my long hair, and braided hair whips in the wind,
Yeah.
right? So you don't even have to do those traditional things of, okay, guys, introduce your characters, say what they look like. You can actually start completely in action and
Mhm.
have those other elements embedded in the action. But I
Yeah.
feel like I've strayed from your. Sorry, go. You were gonna say.
No, no, no. Keep going. You said you're straying for a question. I'm interested
I,
to know which one.
I
I
yes. You
forget.
asked a question before, and then I think I went
Oh,
off
about
on a
beginnings and
tangent.
ends,
Yeah, yeah,
or
yeah. Can you restate that question if you
yeah,
remember?
basically, I find the most amount of anxiety that a GM experiences is when they're starting a session, or if it's their start of an adventure, when they're starting an adventure, and when they end a session and when they end an adventure. And I feel like people feel like there are a lot of rules around these things that really aren't. Like people are like, no, the session is 3 hours long. I got to go all the way to 3 hours or whatever it is.
Yeah,
But like, what are some hints and tricks, especially when you're not designing the full flow of the night, because the dungeon is kind of pre-made and has a
yeah.
kind of flow that's going to be inherent to its design. So
Mm,
how would you suggest, like, or how would you mollify the anxiety about starting and then ending the sessions when you're
yeah,
using somebody else's dungeon? I think what you said about the starting is exactly what I would recommend. Like, start them right there, start them right away in the place, so that you don't have to deal with the logistics of moving 4 people or whatever to a
yeah.
location. And but the ending, I feel like, has a lot of
Mm,
baggage on it. Like, imagine you're like, oh, this is a one shot, and you're nowhere near the end of the dungeon in 3 hours, and people are starting to get tired. Like, that can be stressful for a, a
yeah,
new
sure.
GM. So what do you think?
First of all, I think I I'm careful about even using the term one shot
Yeah.
when I do pro DMing things. When I've run a campaign, a one shot, I know that it is definitely a one shot
Yeah.
because I've run it enough times that I know how long it will take, and I've been doing it long enough that I know how to push things along if it needs to be done so.
Yeah.
I would recommend that you call it a small session adventure or a limited session adventure, and then say it might take one. It will take in between 1, 2, maybe 3 sessions, but most likely 1 or 2, right?
Hmm.
And I would say just actually keep it loose for the dungeon master. There's their own sanity and also for the expectations of the players,
Yeah.
because you don't want to have to find that you're reaching that 3 hour point, which has kind of become like an established norm, which never used to be. But anyway, and and you might find that that people are tiring, especially if it's online. If people are doing it online, I think they do get tired about the 3 hour point. But and you might think, oh, we need to finish it. Oh no, 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 it's going to take another. We still got another 2 major fights to go. So I think it's best to not even say that it's going to be a one shot. Say it's
Yeah.
going to be a 1 or 2 shot,
Hmm.
and then that covers you.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
then, and in terms of length of session, I think those expectations of it, how long it should be, I don't think those are necessary. I think those are
Yeah.
self-imposed hardships that we put on ourselves.
Yeah.
You
Yeah. And
know?
I agree, because I also feel like you as a GM should never feel the pressure of like, I need to make it to 3 hours. I need to make it to 4 hours. There are groups, I've been part of them. They're awesome, where you play 6 to 8 hours straight, and it's amazing. But then there's like, other groups I'm part of where like we're adults. We have work in the morning, and we're just like trying to get a little game in before before going back to bed. And that may be, is a hard out at 11 or something.
That's right.
And
Yeah.
I would say to a GM, like, there's nothing wrong, especially for a new GM, to be like, how is everyone feeling? Like, we have like, we're like this way amount through this dungeon or something. I'm happy to keep going, but like, just wanted to check in. Does anyone need a bio break? Like, that's just stuff that you shouldn't be afraid of saying. Communication at the
Indeed.
table is like super, super easy.
That's right.
Yeah.
Exactly. And we've in the social games, not the Dice Legends like streams and podcasts and stuff, but in my social games, we've been playing long enough that part of winning in Dungeons and Dragons is just hanging out with your friends.
Exactly. Right? Okay. Yes. This is the thing that I think that I think there is a generation of GMs that are coming in right now that have been sort of like, all of their sensibilities have been shaped by the sort of entertainment games that we see.
That's right.
And it's such a burden to place on yourself to be like, I'm expecting myself the first time I play to do that. You know what I mean? Which is something that's not even really just the game anyway. It's just a game to have fun with your friends.
Yeah, man. Honestly, this is why we've got this whole podcast to begin with. Yeah. Because if we expect ourselves to have a level of polish that, for example, our wonderful, the wonderful folks Critical Role, like, we have so much in the Dungeons and Dragons TTRPG scene to thank them for in terms of the growth of the industry. They're a company that employs more than 20 people.
I say this all the time. They have a writer's room. Like, you don't have a writer's room.
They have multicam setups. Right.
They have someone who builds all of their terrains and set dressings, and you know what I mean? That's right. An impossible standard.
It's unless you happen to have, $5,000 a night, then relax. Yeah. Chill out.
Put on a cool D&D playlist and be like, guys, we're gaming.
Yeah, exactly. Look, so I think that if you're getting together with a group of friends and you make some characters and that's all you do, sweet, you've won. Mm-hmm. If
and you get together, you could have a blast doing so. Making characters is like a mini game within the system. And that is a fun full session of just going around and making characters together.
Totally, bro. And if you get together and you go for 2 hours and the Dungeon Master then says, you know what? This actually took a different direction than I was expecting, which is a really excellent problem.
Yeah.
Because it means the characters have agency. And the players have agency and they're helping to create the story. If after 2 hours, the Dungeon Master says, look, guys, I really need to stop now because you've gone in a way that I just hadn't prepared. I hadn't even thought of. I need some more time to prepare. Mm-hmm. There's nothing wrong with that. You're winning because the table, the group of players is so invested in the game, they've taken it in a place you hadn't,
Yeah.
If the group hangs out together for 5 hours and has a dinner break in between and they're just kind of moseying, you've won because you hung out with your friends for... Yeah.
Yes. And okay, so I have a question now that is, I think probably the question will end on, and it's a really difficult one. So I hope you got some creative juices left.
Oh no, I'm in trouble.
Which is character death, because the time that you receive character deaths most often is early levels and in dungeons. So by setting yourself up as a first-time DM, and you're like, I'm going to use this sort of dungeon. It's levels 1 to 3 or something, and I'm gonna run the dungeon because these excellent GM folks from the podcast I listened to said that this is a good idea. But then you get into it, and the kobolds and the hag are just too much, and they've killed 2 of your players, and you're panicking because you're a new GM, and you're like, what am I going to do? All right, so I've set this scenario up. What do you suggest? Because this is gonna happen if you play a lot of Dungeons and Dragons. It's gonna happen more right as you start.
Yeah, love it. I love this theme. This is a great theme. Before I answer it, I'm actually going to say something else, and then but honestly, I am answering it honestly.
Okay.
There's this wonderful, it might have been Zach Speaks Giant. I don't know who did it. This wonderful old school versus new school character deaths video. I don't know if you've seen it. It's really great. Where it has the new school Dungeons and Dragons player and the characters, the guy says, Alfonso raises his hand and, it has a super emotional scene of the character dying and everyone around the table is weeping. And then they have the 1E, 2E, your character dies. Right. Pulls out a stack of other characters, tears up the top one. All right. Meet Borzo. Borzo is Gorzo's cousin and has inherited all of their armor and weapons and is ready to go.
I was recently talking. I think the episode is actually going to come out after this one. So everyone, you're going to hear this the next episode after this. But I was talking to my friend Danny, who's such an excellent GM and a great player as well. And we were talking about this, and he was like, honestly, as a GM too, it's awesome if someone's like, I just keep kind of remaking the same character. Instead of Orzo, it's Borzo, and then Gorzo. They're all barbarians. They all do the same thing, because that implies something about your world, that there is like this clan of barbarians that all have almost the exact same name and sensibilities. They keep sending people out to do this weird thing.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, that's great.
And it's really helpful if the parents had named all of their children alphabetically.
Exactly.
Borzo, Corzo, Dorzo, Forzo.
Imagine you're 4 deep, and then the next one the player comes with is like, yeah, this is Zorzo, but it's a warlock. And then you're like, oh my God, what is that? What does that mean?
So anyway, back to your actual question. First thing is, I think it's helpful. There's one key piece of dungeoneering knowledge that new players might not have yet, which is run and rest, which goes like this. After you fight, if you are first level, it's okay to retreat, that's the run, and take a long rest.
Yeah.
The dungeon's not going anywhere.
Yes.
And that's
go
back to the
also
village.
Perfect about the dungeon model for this sort of thing is like, then it's because you're not on clocks yet. Like you're still a new GM. You're not going to put a bunch of time sensitive stuff. The dungeon will wait. The hag down there is still going to keep eating all the kobolds, and the kobolds are going to be doing whatever the hag wants them to do for eternity until the players come back.
Exactly. That's right. So that's the first one is, I think, brief your characters, your players, and tell them up front, guys, this is a dungeon. You need to run and rest. That's core dungeoneering technique.
Yeah.
And the second one is that it can be helpful for the dungeon master to consider fates worse / more entertaining than death.
Yeah.
So like if a person does die, what does that mean? Does that mean the hag gets them and resurrects them and they stumble out, but they're partially controlled by the hag, and the player can still control the character, but they have a character scar. There's been some consequence. So I think the character dies, but they get reanimated by a lich and sent out, and they rejoin the party as there's things that you can do as a dungeon master to think, okay, if a character does die, are there ways that I'd want to reintroduce them? But the other thing is that characters do die.
Yeah.
And actually sometimes a character death is the best way to motivate a story forward.
Yeah. I 100% agree. Basically with both of them. And I will add on to your first point about more interesting things than death, that there are tons of tables that are pre-generated, that are out there, that are tools that if you are somebody new, that you can just have with you, and then you can roll on it. You can even have your players roll when they die. Be like, all right, you hit the stone, but you don't feel your spirit like drifting away. Roll some dice. And then you look at it and you're like, yeah, you have a zombie hand now, and it's constantly trying to kill you. Like whatever it is. I think that's a great solution, especially for somebody new who's just like, I don't know how to handle because it's also kind of a weird dynamic at a table where like, if you die, especially in D&D, it's probably during combat, and combat can last a long time.
Yeah, right.
So just like the mechanics of like, oh, my friend is like sadly eating pizza in the corner. A way you can avoid that though is, again, we're just all friends having fun playing games. Be like, slide on over here, Chris. We got some monsters to use to kill your friends. Like,
exactly.
It's great. Yeah.
Yeah. Delegate.
Delegate the death.
Yeah. A plucky hireling, right?
Yeah.
Hey, can you control plucky hireling number 2, please, and give them a name? I haven't done that yet.
And then going back to the rolling thing on generated tables, if you're like, that sounds great, I'm so new that I don't even know where to look for that kind of thing. I would suggest, honestly, probably Morkborg has one. It's a D100 table. That game relies on being able to quickly reintroducing characters as soon as possible. So they have a really great table that has weird ways that people end up back in the party. Like one is, and this one's my favorite, is that a giant worm erupts from the dungeon floor and then falls dead in front of everyone. And then out of the mouth walks the new character being like, what the, like, what just happened to me? Um, Another great one on that table is your character that just died. Nobody remembers that they were part of the party all of a sudden. They only ever remember this new character being part of the party. And then there's a mystery.
Wow.
What's going on? You know what I mean?
Wow, that's cool.
So there's tools out there that are pre-gens that you don't have to spend a ton of time prepping for. It's available, is all I'm saying.
Yeah.
Vahid, this has been such a great conversation. I could keep talking forever about this stuff.
Yeah,
We'll
me
have
too,
you
bro.
back on basically whenever. But let's do a little bit more. Plug Dice Legends, plug the podcast again. Why should people get involved who are interested in TTRPGs? Because I think that our audiences are very similar, so they might be interested in what you're doing.
Yeah, please do come check out our podcast, Dungeon Mastering is Easy. You can find it on all the major platforms. We've interviewed, the first 7 or 8 are out now, and the format is an interview similar like, conversation that you and I have just had, Nick, where we talk with people that are in the Dungeons and Dragons space around a theme. And it's some of the themes. One of the themes, in fact, is coping with character deaths. That is actually one of the themes. But there's other fascinating ones like a focus on dragons, and there's one around starting new campaigns, and one's around running non-playing characters that your players will fall in love with. A whole bunch of really interesting topics that we think are valuable for new dungeon masters, but also have enough substance that are, well, I've learned a great deal from the people that I've been interviewing, and I've been playing Dungeons and Dragons for 40 years.
Yeah.
So we'd love it if you were to check out our podcast and share it with your friends.
Pop on over. I highly recommend their podcast. I was just before we talked, was listening to the most recent one that you were doing. Is it with Molly or is that a different one? I'm just double checking. Let's see.
Just double checking. What is the most recent one?
No, because this is with Gnome Ann.
Gnome Ann. Yeah. Oh, she is amazing.
Yeah, so cool.
She's
really
so
good
cool.
Takes.
And she's got a systematic mind. She comes to the interview and says, okay, Vahid, I've got 3 points I want to make. This is point number 1. This is point number 2. This is point number 3.
A very different experience at the Tabletop studio when you were like, so you want to talk about this? I was like, yeah, wherever the conversation goes. And I would also say that if you're like, hey, I want to listen to more conversations like you hear on Tabletopped, but I don't have a whole lot of time, the episodes are around 30 minutes, are very digestible, very quick, to be able to just kind of sink your teeth into a topic. A very good moosh boosh. So, and then tell folks about Dice Legends. Where can people see that stuff, and what is that all about?
Okay, so Dice Legends, as in dice, and then Legends with an NZ on the end, Legends, because we live in New Zealand. Hence the NZ. We are a Dungeons and Dragons channel. We've done a combination of actual play storylines that are available on YouTube and on podcast formats. And we also more recently have been doing these kind of YouTube videos and podcasts that are around helping players and dungeon masters with, tools and tricks to improve the enjoyment of the game. So just type in Dice Legends over on YouTube or on the interweb, Instagram, all the places. It's all the same. Dice Legends. Yeah.
Cool. All right. Well, it was a pleasure to talking with you, and we'll definitely have you on soon. And if you want to hear more conversations like this, then you should subscribe to Tabletopped. We release every other Monday these days, and we have so many more good conversations like this one coming your way. So just hit that little subscribe button. There is also another way to support us, which is by going to tabletopppod.com and sending us in topics you want to hear about. We have a contact form right on the front page. Would love to hear from you guys there. Vahid, so much good things going you got your guys' way. I can't wait to hear your next episode, and we'll have you on again soon.
Thank you so much, Nick, for the opportunity. I really appreciate it.
Of course. All right, everyone. We'll see you next time.
See
Bye.
ya.